Hey guys, so we're going to start by talking about classifying real numbers. And you should know about all the types of numbers there are by now. But in case you don't, we're going to do a quick little review of that. So classifying real numbers, we have this whole real number system. We're going to learn about a new addition to the number system a little bit later on. In the meantime, we're going to refresh real quick over what we have here today and what you should know about. Okay, so we have the real number system all the way over here in purple. Okay, the real number system encompasses all of this, and it's every number you ever known. Okay, the stuff we're going to learn new, it's going to be a brand new number, but every number you've ever encountered in your lifetime, since when you were a little kid, is a real number. But it's different levels, it's different categories of this number, and some might fall into multiple ones, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But your real numbers is any value that can be represented on a number line. Okay, so if we have a ruler here, okay, it can show us, in this case, from 1 all the way to however long. So you can see 6 on this one. And it goes by whole numbers, right? It goes 1, then 2, then 3, so forth and so on. And in between are all these dashes, and those dashes represent smaller fractional values. So you have a half an inch, a quarter of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. They're all smaller pieces of the whole, but it's everything that can be put on a number line. Okay, so that's your real numbers. Anything that I can put on a number line, which what you've done, like I said, forever, since you've known numbers. So after that, we can break it down into two smaller parts. So we have what are called rational numbers and irrational numbers. I'm going to start down here with those. So our irrational numbers are numbers that they absolutely cannot be written as a ratio. And a ratio is a fraction. So I can't write it as something over something else. And because I can't write it as a fraction, I can't write it as a decimal that ends or terminates, we call it, or is repeating. So your big irrational numbers, most famous irrational number is pi, 3.14159. It goes on and on and on forever, right? So that's your most famous irrational number. I can't write it as a fraction, and it just keeps on going. The other irrational numbers come from square roots. Those are your most common ones. So square roots, if you put them in a calculator, most of the time you're going to get a decimal. So like if I put square root of 2 in a calculator, I'm going to get 1.41, and it's going to keep going. Your exceptions to that rule are your perfect squares. If I put the square root of 9 in a calculator, it's going to give me back 3, right? Square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of 25 is 5. Those are all whole numbers. Those I can write as fractions, and they don't have decimals. So those pieces don't count. But all your other square roots, square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 75, anything that will not get you a whole number, those are your irrational values. Okay, so pi and square roots that are not perfect. Now, our big category, rational numbers. Those are their opposites. They're counter. One's irrational, the other one's rational. So your rational numbers can be written as ratios, hence the word rational. It has ratio right here, right in it. So I can write them as a fraction. Any number I can write as a fraction, right? 1/2, that's a typical fraction. 3/4, 32/7. Anything I can write, a number over another. Whole numbers can always be written as fractions, right? I can take any whole number and put it over 1. 9 over 1, 52 over 1. A whole number can always be written as a fraction, okay? And then if I was to get their decimal counterpart, they're either going to end like 1/2, 1 over 2 is 0.5. That's it. There's nothing past that 5. It ends, it truncates, it terminates. Or 1/3, put that in a calculator, it's 0.3333. It's going to keep on going, right? We put that bar over it to show that it's repeating. Those are all rational numbers, okay? Now, from rational, I can make it even more specific. Now, everything down this column here, those three, they have no decimals. They are not fractions. They are not decimals. They are the whole number parts, okay? And we can break them down into different categories. Integers are non-decimals that are positive and negative. So integers can be both signs, a positive and a negative. But again, they have no decimals. Whole numbers are only positives, and these include 0. And an easy way to remember that is the word whole. 0 has a hole in it right here, right? So that has to be included in my whole numbers. So 0 and all the positives above it. And then our natural numbers, they don't include 0. So really the only difference between whole numbers and natural numbers is that 0. Whole includes it, natural does not. We also call the natural numbers our counting numbers, because when you count, if I start with my fingers, right? I'm going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4, so forth. I start with 1 and start with 0. I did not include it. So that's why sometimes you'll hear natural numbers be called counting numbers as well. Okay, so we're going to talk about classifying numbers. So if I was to give you a number, say the number 5, okay, the number 5, it's one of my counting numbers, right? I can count 5 fingers right there. So it's a natural number. It's a whole number. I can get there still on the number line, starting at 0, get to 5. It's an integer because it's positive. It's a positive 5. And therefore, it's a rational number. I can write it as a ratio 5/1. And because it can fall in a number line, it's a real number. So that number just included all 5 of these categories. Okay. I can give you another number like -7. -7 would start at the integers height now because it's not positive. It can't be these two. So it would start at integers. Then again, it could be a ratio and then a real number. Something like 2/3, that would only fall in here in the ratio category and then into the real numbers. It's not any of these here because it can be written as a decimal. Okay. And then something like the square root of 32. If I put in my calculator, I'm going to get a decimal. It's not a perfect square. That would be irrational and real. Nothing's going to fall in the blue and the red, just so you know. They cannot jump over from one section to the next. So any rational number, any of these whole values, integers, whole, natural, they're not going to be under this red column. So we're going to jump into classifying these numbers. Okay. So the next thing, like I said, we're going to take a look, see where they fall. Some things we might have to reduce before we can find their home, but we're going to start learning or start practicing on how to classify these numbers. If you're stuck on something, watch it again. Ask me any questions.